Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about something more important than success, more important than status, and definitely more important than the labels society throws at us. I want to talk about the difference between high value and low value men, not as society defines them, but as life defines them. Because the world doesn't reward the loudest man, it rewards the most disciplined one, the most intentional one, the one who takes responsibility when everyone else is busy making excuses. High value has nothing to do with the possessions a man carries, and everything to do with the character he builds. Society often teaches men to measure their worth in numbers, how much they earn, how much attention they receive, how many people applaud their achievements. But high value is never rooted in external noise. It is a quiet internal strength shaped by the choices a man makes when nobody is watching. A truly valuable man is created through self-mastery, discipline, and the willingness to grow beyond his comfort zones, even when the world is not clapping for him. The mistake many men make is assuming that money, status, or popularity automatically makes them high value. But you can give a weak man success, and he will still sabotage it. You can give him opportunities, and he will still waste them. Why? Because value comes from within. Without integrity, without purpose, without emotional control, nothing external can sustain the identity he tries to project. A man who lacks character will always feel like an imposter in his own life, no matter how impressive it looks from the outside. High value is built through discipline. It is built every time a man wakes up early to pursue his goals while others sleep. It is built every time he chooses long-term growth over short-term pleasure. It is built every time he keeps a promise to himself, especially when breaking it would be easier. Discipline shapes a man's identity. It proves to him that he is capable of controlling the direction of his life, rather than drifting in the current of impulses and emotions. It is the foundation that allows him to stand firmly even when life becomes a storm. Character also reveals itself through responsibility. A high-value man does not run from accountability. He takes ownership of his decisions, his actions, and even his failures. He understands that life is not always fair, but instead of complaining, he adapts and evolves. He sees challenges as opportunities to strengthen himself rather than excuses to give up. This mindset sets him apart. Because a man who holds himself responsible becomes powerful, he stops waiting for someone else to fix his life. The way a man treats others is another reflection of his value. A high-value man treats people with respect, not because he wants something in return, but because he respects himself first. He doesn't belittle others to feel superior, nor does he pretend to be humble for approval. His character speaks through consistency, through how he speaks, how he listens, and how he shows up in people's lives. His presence brings stability, clarity, and strength, not confusion or emotional chaos. Self-awareness also shapes a man's value. A high-value man knows his weaknesses not to shame himself, but to improve himself. He is honest about his flaws and courageous enough to work on them. He doesn't hide behind ego or pretend to be perfect. Instead, he focuses on evolution. This honesty with himself allows him to build authenticity, something that no wealth or status can imitate. People trust him because he is real. He has nothing to prove and nothing to hide. A man's internal world is where his true value is created. Without emotional control, a man becomes a prisoner of his reactions. Without purpose, he becomes a wanderer. Without discipline, he becomes inconsistent. But when a man cultivates these qualities, he becomes grounded. He becomes focused. He becomes someone who can be relied upon. That is what makes him valuable. Not the car he drives, not the job title he holds, not the size of his wallet. High value is a lifelong process. It is something a man earns through consistent choices, not something he declares about himself. It is not loud, not boastful, not arrogant. It is calm, intentional, and rooted in self-respect. Everything a high-value man builds externally, relationships, career, legacy, is simply an extension of who he has built himself to be internally. And the truth is, every man has the ability to step into this value. It requires no special background, no unique advantage, no lucky break. It requires a decision to build character instead of focusing on image, to choose discipline over excuses, to choose purpose over distraction, and to choose growth over comfort. That decision is what separates a high-value man from the rest. Low value is not an insult, it is a state of being shaped by choices, habits, and patterns that weaken a man instead of strengthening him. When we talk about low value, we are not talking about a man's background, income, or past. We are talking about the mindset he carries and the behaviors he repeats. A man becomes low value when he repeatedly avoids responsibility, when he allows his emotions to dictate his actions, and when he becomes comfortable living beneath his potential. It is not something that appears overnight. It grows gradually, every time he chooses comfort over growth and excuses over discipline. One of the clearest signs of low value is the constant avoidance of responsibility. A man who refuses to take accountability for his life always finds someone else to blame. His parents, society, his partner, his friends, the economy, or even fate. Instead of asking how he can improve, he asks why the world is unfair. This mindset traps him in a cycle where nothing changes because he never changes. He becomes a spectator in his own life, reacting to everything but taking initiative in nothing. Responsibility is what turns boys into men, and without it, a person remains emotionally stuck, no matter their age. Low value is also fueled by emotional chaos. A man who cannot control his emotions becomes unpredictable, unstable, and difficult to depend on. When anger dictates his decisions, when insecurity shapes his relationships, when fear stops him from pursuing opportunities, he loses authority over himself. Emotional chaos doesn't just damage his internal peace, it affects those around him. People stop trusting him because they never know which version of him they will encounter. Emotional stability doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means understanding, managing, and channeling them in a productive way. Without this, a man becomes a slave to his impulses. Another characteristic of low value is the constant pursuit of validation. Instead of cultivating inner worth, he seeks approval from others to feel significant. He needs attention to feel confident, needs praise to feel capable, and needs people's opinions to guide his self-worth. This dependence makes him fragile. When validation disappears, his identity collapses. A man who relies on others to feel valuable never truly knows who he is, because his confidence is borrowed, not built. Low-value behavior also shows through a lack of discipline. A man who cannot control his habits, routines, or desires will always live in survival mode rather than progress mode. He procrastinates important tasks, avoids challenges, and chooses pleasure over purpose. His goals remain dreams because he lacks the consistency to turn them into reality. Discipline is what creates momentum. Without it, life becomes repetitive, stagnant, and directionless. A man without discipline doesn't just lose opportunities. He loses respect for himself. The low-value state is also reflected in relationships. A man who is emotionally chaotic, validation-seeking, and responsibility-avoidant often becomes unreliable in his interactions. He may drain others with his inconsistency, take more than he gives, or project his insecurities onto people who care about him. Instead of building healthy connections, he unknowingly sabotages them. Relationships demand maturity, communication, and stability, qualities a low-value man struggles to maintain. But the most important thing to understand is that low value is not permanent. It is a stage many men pass through before they realize they need to evolve. It is a wake-up call, not a life sentence. A man becomes low value when he stops trying, when he stops learning, when he stops challenging himself to rise above his weaknesses. But the moment he decides to confront the patterns holding him back, transformation begins. Awareness is the first step. Courage is the second. Consistency is the third. Every low-value habit has a high-value counterpart waiting to be chosen. Responsibility replaces blame. Emotional control replaces chaos. Discipline replaces stagnation. Purpose replaces distraction. Self-respect replaces the constant need for validation. These choices reshape a man from the inside out. A low-value man becomes high-value not by changing his circumstances, but by changing his mindset. Not by seeking admiration, but by earning self-respect. Not by waiting for life to treat him better, but by treating himself better first. The difference lies in the willingness to rise, to grow, and to demand more from oneself. Low value is the starting point. Transformation is the journey. A man's discipline is one of the greatest predictors of his destiny. It determines the direction of his life far more than his environment, his upbringing, or the circumstances he was born into. Many people believe that success is a matter of luck, opportunity, or external advantage, But discipline is the force that turns possibility into reality. It is the bridge between goals and achievement, between intention and execution. Without discipline, even the most talented man will watch his potential fade. With discipline, even the man with the most difficult starting point can rise beyond what anyone expected. Discipline is not about perfection. It is about consistency. It is the daily choice to do what is necessary instead of what is comfortable. It is the quiet decision made every morning when the alarm goes off: get up or stay asleep. It is the repeated action a man takes when nobody is checking on him or praising him for his effort. It is the ability to keep going when motivation weakens, to stay focused when distractions multiply, and to move forward even when progress is slow. Discipline builds internal strength, because every time a man honors his commitments, he proves to himself that he can trust his own word. Many men underestimate the power of discipline because they believe they are limited by their environment or background. It is true that life presents different challenges to each person, but discipline is the equalizer. A man who practices discipline can outgrow his circumstances. He stops waiting for perfect conditions and starts creating his own momentum. He stops blaming external factors and takes control of what he can influence: his habits, his routines, his choices. This shift in mindset transforms his life, because it moves him from victim to creator, from passive to empowered. Discipline also shapes a man's identity. Over time, the habits he repeats define who he becomes. A man who consistently works on his goals becomes productive. A man who consistently cares for his body becomes strong. A man who continually educates himself becomes wise. A man who regularly faces his fears becomes courageous. These traits are not genetic, they are cultivated through repeated action. Discipline is the sculptor of character, carving out strength, resilience, and integrity through daily commitment. A lack of discipline, on the other hand, creates a life filled with regret. When a man gives in to impulses, procrastination, or laziness, he begins to feel powerless. He avoids difficult tasks only to suffer greater consequences later. He puts off growth only to watch opportunities pass by. Over time, he becomes frustrated with himself because deep down, he knows he is capable of more. This inner conflict can lead to bitterness, jealousy, or resentment. Not because others are more talented, but because others were more disciplined. Discipline isn't just about doing the hard work, it is about protecting a man from the pain of knowing he's settled. Discipline also affects emotional stability. When a man maintains structure in his life, he gains clarity and control. His mind becomes sharper, and his emotions less reactive. He is less likely to be overwhelmed by stress because he has built the mental strength to handle pressure. He becomes more reliable, more grounded, and more confident. People trust him because he consistently shows up. He trusts himself because he follows through on his intentions. Discipline anchors a man, allowing him to navigate life with purpose instead of drifting aimlessly. Relationships are also influenced by discipline. A disciplined man communicates better, manages his emotions more effectively, and maintains healthier interactions. He respects boundaries, both his own and others. He does not become unstable during conflict because he has trained his mind to stay calm and think rationally. He invests effort into his relationships the same way he invests effort into his goals. He knows that consistency builds trust, and trust builds connection. Without discipline, relationships become chaotic, filled with broken promises and emotional unpredictability. Purpose and discipline work hand in hand. A man without discipline may feel inspired, but he lacks direction. A man with discipline can turn even a simple vision into a powerful mission. Purpose gives him a reason to stay committed, while discipline gives him the strength to keep moving even when the journey becomes difficult. This combination creates a sense of fulfillment and inner peace that no shortcut or temporary pleasure can replace. Ultimately, discipline gives a man control over his destiny. It empowers him to rise above excuses, overcome limitations, and shape a future he is proud of. It turns dreams into plans and plans into achievements. It builds character stronger than circumstances and resilience tougher than challenges. Discipline is not just a habit, it is a lifestyle, a mindset, and a declaration that a man refuses to be defeated by his own weaknesses. When a man embraces discipline, he steps into the full power of his potential, and his destiny begins to align with the greatness he is willing to work for. ChatGPT said emotional control is not about suppressing feelings or pretending to be made of steel. It is about developing the strength to guide emotions, instead of allowing emotions to guide behavior. Many people misunderstand emotional control as coldness or numbness, but it is the opposite. It is the ability to understand your emotions, sit with them, process them, and choose your response with intention rather than impulse. This is what makes it a form of power, because a man who controls himself can handle situations, relationships, and challenges with clarity and stability. Most people live in reaction mode. They feel anger and immediately lash out. They feel fear and instantly retreat. They feel insecurity and start seeking validation to fill the void. But emotional control breaks this cycle. It teaches a man that emotions are signals, not commands. You can feel anger without becoming destructive. You can feel fear without becoming paralyzed. You can feel insecurity without self-sabotaging. A man who learns to control his emotions is not emotionless, he is emotionally intelligent. Emotional control also creates a quieter mind. When you allow emotions to run wild, your thoughts become chaotic. Stress grows, confusion increases, and your ability to make sound decisions weakens. But when you learn to pause before reacting, when you breathe and observe your emotions instead of being consumed by them, you gain mental clarity. This clarity allows you to think rationally, solve problems effectively, and communicate more calmly. Emotional control becomes a shield that protects your peace, even during turbulence. Without emotional control, a man becomes unpredictable, both to others and to himself. He may regret the words he says in anger, the decisions he makes in fear, or the actions he takes during insecurity. He may push away people he loves, sabotage opportunities, or create conflicts that could have been avoided. Life feels unstable because he is unstable inside. This is why emotional control is such a defining trait. It determines the quality of a man's relationships, career, and personal growth. One of the most important aspects of emotional control is self-awareness. To control your emotions, you must first recognize them. You must understand your triggers, your fears, your insecurities, and the patterns that influence your behavior. This requires honesty, an honest look into your own heart without defensiveness or denial. Many people run from this process because it forces them to confront uncomfortable truths. But the man who chooses to face himself becomes stronger, because awareness gives him the power to change. Emotional control also demands discipline. It requires consistent effort to stay grounded when you want to explode, to breathe when you want to shout, and to think when you want to react. It asks you to respond based on values, not impulses. It pushes you to develop patience, humility, and self-respect. This discipline becomes a habit over time. The more you practice emotional control, the more natural it becomes. You start recognizing emotional storms before they hit, and you learn how to anchor yourself so you don't get swept away. In relationships, emotional control is indispensable. Conflict, misunderstanding, stress, and tension are all part of human connection. Without emotional control, these moments become destructive. A man who reacts from anger may say hurtful things that damage trust. A man who acts from insecurity may become jealous, controlling, or withdrawn. But a man who has emotional control approaches conflict with clarity. He listens before responding. He communicates without aggression. He expresses emotions without losing himself to them. This stability makes others feel safe, respected, and valued. Emotional control does not mean you never express emotions. It means you express them responsibly. You can share pain without becoming cruel, express frustration without disrespect, and talk about fear without becoming powerless. This balance is what makes emotional control a form of leadership, not just in relationships, but in all areas of life. People are naturally drawn to someone who remains composed in chaos because it shows strength, maturity, and resilience. Another powerful part of emotional control is the ability to detach from things that do not deserve your energy. Not everything requires a reaction. Not every disagreement requires a battle. Not every insult requires a response. Emotional control teaches you to conserve your power, to walk away from unnecessary conflict, and to protect your inner world from negativity. This ability to let go is what gives you peace, because you no longer allow external situations to dictate your emotional state. Ultimately, emotional control is freedom. Freedom from being manipulated by your own impulses. Freedom from regretting your reactions. freedom from the emotional roller coaster that drains your confidence and clarity. When a man learns to control his emotions, he becomes unshakable. He becomes someone who can lead, protect, love, and grow with steadiness. Emotional control is not the absence of emotion. It is the mastery of emotion. And that mastery elevates a man's value more than anything external ever could.